Why, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Innovantage Podcast, where business meets tech to bring you your competitive edge. As always, I'm your host, Max, and it is my ongoing duty to explore that edge between business and tech to help you on both sides. Today, we're going to be talking about something very, very near and dear to everybody who's ever done any sort of pitching, be it professional pitching when you're talking to your bosses, be it professional pitching when you're talking to your employees, be it pitching for investors if you're a startup, be it pitching to your grandparents or parents if you want to go out late for some Friday afternoon. We are going to be talking about the art and the mastery of pitching, but not only that. We are going to be talking about entrepreneurship in and of itself. We're going to be touching on very many interesting topics, and to help me on that journey today is Professor Robin de Kok, who is the professor for entrepreneurship in the Antwerp Management School and an author of Mastering the Pitch. Hello, Robin. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation.
You're always welcome. You're always welcome. So, I have had a first-hand experience of you talking about how to master pitching when I was studying in Antwerp Management School. This was one of the lectures that really stood out because it relates to a lot of my own personal experiences. I pitch a lot. I pitch in different situations, and I have as a result, basically, of our studies, I have a document of how you outline the perfect pitch where I basically design my pitches after that document. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you arrive to that point in your career where you know everything about pitching? How did you decide to become a professor for entrepreneurship specifically? And what does that even entail for those of us that do not know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm working in entrepreneurship almost for 20 years. So for 20 years I help people, students, entrepreneurs to develop their ideas. And what I noticed after a while, if you work months with those people and you know that this idea is a great idea, and then at the end of the road, they need to pitch in front of investors, then sometimes you see that they do not do a great job and the idea falls on the ground. It's not picked up by the investors or by the management team, and that's a pity, and that's a little bit of a frustration for myself. So that was one of the motivations that I thought, okay, we need to bring more knowledge to people on how to pitch an idea and how to sell an idea to a management team, to a investor committee. So that was one of the motivations. At the same time, what I also saw is, of course, I'm reading the academic world, scientific work around the world. What we saw is that the last 10 years, the amount of research on pitching increased dramatically. So bringing those two things together was a motivation for me to write the book Mastering the Pitch.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Can you tell me a little bit about your academic career so far? Like, how does entrepreneurship in academics work in and of itself? Because when most people hear an entrepreneur, they think, this visionary person that is pulling himself up by the bootstraps, going against the grain, doing the impossible, and academics just does not organically gel with that vision.
Well, yeah, that for a long period of time, this was true. We saw the entrepreneur as the big visionary, the one who could almost predict the future. But the last 10, 15 years, and especially with the book, The Lean Startup, it changed a bit. There are a lot of methods now, like the Lean Startup, who actually help us to reduce the risks of entrepreneurship as much as we can by developing hypothesis assumptions around your idea and testing those first together with the market in iterative cycles. So in a way, we're moving from the entrepreneur as the big visionary to an entrepreneur who's the one who's testing hypothesis, who is very good in experimenting, who's using this research in his pitch to convince investors. But of course, risk taking remains important. Having a great vision remains important, but we see that they are using a lot more of these methods to reduce the risks and to really test it in iterative cycles with your market. So that is a change that I saw the last, let's say, 10, 15 years.
So making it more structural, more understandable, I guess. Makes
Yeah,
sense
and
to
that's
me
of
when it
course in
comes to
line.
academics.
That's in line with how academics do their academic work. We're also
Yeah.
working with hypothesis and testing it out and using scientifically backed methods, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So then tell me a little bit about the book itself. What do you want to achieve with it? What is it aimed to do, ideally?
It aimed to improve people's pitches, and I want to avoid that if you have a very strong idea, that it's not picked up by somebody else who can help you to give you funding to make impact with your ideas. So it's really about supporting people with scientific backed insights to improve their pitch. And I think that is a difference with a lot of books, because there are a lot of books on pitching out there, but most of them are anecdotal. They are
Hmm.
based on the experience of one person, and that is very valuable, no doubt about that. But I want to complement it with research showing that about 400 entrepreneurs are doing that thing right, and that's why they were successful. So I think I also give a bit of a broader view on what are scientifically backed insights that we can use and that we can use to improve our pitches and create more impact with our ideas. So that's the aim of the book.
Sounds very great. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that research part of it works? How did you approach your research, and maybe how much time did it take you to actually arrive to a point where you felt comfortable writing a whole book on it?
Yeah. So there are two elements. First of all, there were a lot of colleagues of mine doing research on pitching all around the world. So I just needed to read all these academic works and try to translate it so that they are approachable, accessible for a broader audience. So that was basically my job in the book to summarize, to bring together these insights to a broader audience. And secondly, what I also did is I did interviews with quite some entrepreneurs in Belgium, in Europe, in the US, and also with investors. I talked to German investors, Swiss investors, US investors, Belgian investors to see what they were thinking about these insights also from the academic world. So bringing all this together is mastering the pitch. So I try to do it in a accessible way. The insights that are normally locked into academic papers, uh, bring those insights closer to the people that really need it, the entrepreneurs who are pitching their ideas.
So what is then the biggest misconception that you found out about teaching overall?
I actually start my book with the four myths of pitching, and actually also misconceptions about pitching. One of them, for instance, is that there is no magical formula. Pitching is a bit like going on a date where you need to find a match with the person in front of you, and some things you do with that one person don't work, you don't have a match. But if you do the same thing with another person, it might be a match. So that's why there might not be a real magical formula, but there are a lot of guidelines that can help you to do a better job in pitching. So that was one of the misconceptions. Another one is that we think that pitching is a lot about our slides. We are so focused on these slides, and they are important, but there's a lot more besides slides. There is the passion, the energy, the drive, the tone of voice, the body language, the team dynamics. They all play a role when you are pitching. So we should not forget also those ones.
That is true. That is true. I've throughout my career, when I was pitching, and I am still pitching a lot, I've experimented different approaches of, using a slide deck, a big one, a small one, not using one at all. And I definitely can agree with your observation that it very much depends on who you're talking to. And that's what I arrived to organically. And I love to hear that, it's supported by research. That sometimes I really feel that, okay, for this type of audience, I really need some nice visualization. I need a deck. I need it to be very snappy. I need it to tell my story more so than myself, because that type of audience will just not listen to me by myself if I talk. On the other hand, when I speak to some other people, I understand that, okay, if I start whipping out a presentation right now and showing it to them, they're going to roll their eyes at me and they're going to forget that I even exist. And I need to carry it just through on personality and energy alone. And of course, there's always a mix of it in between. So again, great to hear that, it's research based now, not just my own personal anecdotes. I already kind of see the value of the book.
Yeah. There's even research which is called the 7% of communication, which
Hmm.
actually shows that if we want to bring a message across, words only count for 7%. Tone of voice, body language, they matter a lot more. Of course, they replicated the research many times, and the percentages change a bit from context to context, but that also shows that it's not only words, it's not only our slides, it's also other stuff that is important when we want to convince somebody else. Yeah.
I agree. I agree, definitely. And that's why one of the reasons that the main media for the podcast itself is YouTube, so visual media. We don't do anything too extravagant in terms of visuals, but
Mm.
it is a huge part of communication, I feel, in the message that we're trying to get across. Just goes out much more effectively and better if it's communicated visually as well as audibly. So again, no arguments for me. Very, very hard to argue with that position, especially when it's research based. So then let's dive a little bit deeper. I'm sure that your book is full of specific examples of what you found out in your research. Um, so how do you start a pitch? What is the most important in the beginning? I understand that the first 150 milliseconds are the most important ones. Can you tell us a little bit why that is, or why specifically the beginning is so important?
Yeah, that was one of the surprises in the researches that I found is that, of course, the first impression is important, but apparently after 150 milliseconds, people already have an idea about you, and after 30 minutes, they have a lasting idea of you. So I don't know how long we are in the podcast now, but people at home have an idea about us now or already. So. And the most important thing in the end is just to be yourself, because you need to know if I am convincing, for instance, an investor, I probably need to work with that person for the coming, I don't know, 5, 8, 10 years. So if I'm trying to be someone else in the beginning, after a while, if you build up the relationship with the investor, they will figure out who you are. So it, you need to be honest, you need to be yourself from in the beginning. Of course, what we see is that some people jump into a box and try to be someone else. And there are a few boxes, according to research, that you don't want to be in.
Hmm.
One of them, according to a research of Professor Elsbach, published in the Harvard Business Review, according one of these boxes is the pushover. So typically, if you give a presentation and then there is a Q&A, and some of the investors say, okay, I want to have it more red. And if your concept is blue, the pushover will say, oh, no worries, we can change it to red. But that is not what you want to do. And you want to also sell a bit your core concept. And if one person says something else in the jury, changing it entirely is also not what you want. So there are a few of these boxes that you don't want to be in. So that's really important and interesting research.
Does cultural background and framework influence that, or different cultures have different boxes that you do not want to be in, or is that more so a universal thing where again it's more kind of depending on who you're pitching to?
Mhm. I believe the research was conducted in the US. And of course, you have differences when we talk about pitching uh, US versus Europe versus Asia. So, what we see in the US is that they tend to be a lot more direct, they tend to be bolder, they tend to love to see pitches that are going to change the world and are very ambitious. In Europe, there's a tendency, on average, of course, that we focus a bit more on the details, on how does it work exactly? Do you have any proof? So we're already doing a bit of a due diligence during the pitch. Um, and in Asia, it's a lot more indirect. You first need to build trust and then you talk about business. And it's also more hierarchical. So the decision in Asia takes probably a lot more time because they need to check with their bosses and so on, with their investment committee. While in the US, decisions go a lot faster. So you see differences in pitches, in taking decisions also based on pitches between different cultures also.
So is there anything else that you can add in terms of the science of pitching? What are some interesting scientific foundings that you have found out besides what we've already discussed?
Yeah. Um, I know I knew already that the story was really important and telling a story is can have a big impact. But what I found in a lot of researches is um, that stories are 22 times more memorable than facts. And that surprised me a bit because stories they stick around a lot more, they help to sustain attention a lot more than anything else. So if you think about your pitch and you think about, okay, I need to think about this, and I need to say the problem, the solution, the business model, the IP, and so on, try to make it a story. Try to develop a storyline where you say, okay, I experienced this firsthand. And what I discovered is that I was not the only one. There is a big market out there. And that's why we have this vision to solve this problem. That is really telling a story rather than having a checklist with, okay, I mentioned this and I mentioned this. So yeah, that was something that surprised me quite a lot is that stories are that important also, and storytelling is that important in developing your pitch.
So how do you then work on that type of story? How do you develop it? I guess how do you create it, or I don't know, how do you find it within yourself that story that is captivating and interesting and connects to your pitch at the same time?
Yeah, there's one thing designing the story, and most I give a bit of insights in the book also. The typical story is telling what the situation is as is, and then all of a sudden something happens, and here you are trying to solve it. That is a typical story line that you could use in a pitch. That's one thing, designing the story. Another thing is telling the story in a captive very nice way. So these are two different things. The one thing is about making the plan and making the story. The other thing is about performing, is about bringing the story in a nice, captivating way. So yeah, these are things that are also focused on in the book, Mastering the Pitch.
I feel that a lot of people will try to default to humor to make a story more interesting, to make it funny, to make it more memorable that way, because, telling investors about a device that will increase like 10% of a factory's output is not very captivating in and of itself, and you want to kind of influence it with humor. Is that a good idea in and of itself, or is that rather a bad idea to try and inject humor into a pitch?
Well, definitely humor can make your pitch more memorable. And you need to know sometimes you're in a situation where maybe there are 20 pitches, 10 pitches on a day. And of course, if you can bring a bit of humor in it, you're trying also to create an emotional connection with your audience. You help to sustain attention also. So humor can be, at least, especially in the beginning, maybe to break the ice, can be very important. What they also found is self-depreciating humor. So
Hmm.
taking yourself not too serious could also help to make you more authentic and to also better create a connection and trust with your audience. So humor can help, but there is also uh, a, a moment with a lot of these concepts. There's an inverted U, which means
Hmm.
that there's could be too much humor also. If it becomes a comedy show where you are the one making the jokes, the focus is not anymore on your ID and on whether we should invest in your ID, but it's on you making jokes the entire time and also making it not that professional anymore. So there is a certain balance, but humor can definitely have a positive impact also.
So, how do you find that balance? How do you decide when enough humor is enough humor? Or maybe it's safer to just avoid humor altogether and then just focus on telling a good story rather than a captivating story.
Well, what they say is that um, you need to have authentic humor, whatever that
Hmm.
means. But it means that it should not be too scripted or not too prepared. It can be more spontaneous. That is an element that we find in research. Another element is, of course, is that it might be very good in the beginning to break the ice, to create the connection, and it might be limited to one or two jokes if you talk about a 10 or 15-minute pitch. But like I said, it might also depend on what you feel in the room, what kind of audience that you have. That could also play a part in the amount of humor that you can use. Um, and it also depends on who you are. If you are a person which likes to make the balance between the humor and the professionalism, then this is who you are. But I think it can be very memorable. It can make your pitch stick around more if you use some humor without uh, using it too much.
Balance in all things, I guess. So then, what do you have any examples of when humor fails or just cringe-worthy moments of people pitching that you found throughout your research or throughout your career that you may share?
Well, sometimes you have inappropriate jokes. That can be a difficult one. That's something that could actually hurt people, and so that sometimes happens. These type of jokes, but when we think about failures in pitches, most of the times it also has to do with technical stuff that goes wrong. Um, it might be nice to show a demo, but a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, sometimes this demo doesn't work or takes more time or kills the flow of your pitch. I remember one legendary pitch of the Surface tablet of
Hmm.
Microsoft, and one of the executives of Microsoft is trying to show how the Surface tablet works, and it doesn't work. And the second one also doesn't work. So then, of course, the golden rule is the show must go on, and it needs to be very normal, or there needs to be a plan B that can assure that you can continue with the pitch although the demo didn't work. So that is where I saw the most failures is when you're trying to use demos in your pitch. Make sure you tested it very well, and make sure you always have a plan B so that the show can go on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think two hilarious, well, one hilarious example that probably everybody knows of is when they were presenting the Cybertruck, unveiling it for the first time, when Elon was hitting the doors and showing how robust they are, and then the guy just takes a metal ball and throws it against the window, and the window cracks, and there's just awkward silence in that moment. They're like, okay, let's move on.
Mm.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
So that's
So
one
that's
thing.
also an
And
example of a typical demo that goes wrong. So
yeah.
a lot of these failures come back to this. And also in the book, I give a lot of examples of where it goes wrong. Another one is Steve Ballmer. You might know him from Microsoft, a very rich guy now after all these years at Microsoft. But he also has one of his pitches where he's super enthusiastic, but it goes a bit, it's a bit too much, right? So passion is really important in your pitch, obviously, no doubt about that, and energy and drive. But that was a bit over the top. So we come back to the balance and the inverted U curve, where there can also be too much of passion, and then it becomes a bit ridiculous, hilarious, as you call it. So that's another example online that you can find on YouTube.
True, true. I've seen that. I've seen that. His energy is, some may say, very synthetic
Mm.
in his approach. But yeah, and the other point that I'd like to point out about the testing things in advance and trusting your product before you do a demo is the founder of the Segway. I'm sure you've heard this story as well, where he was showcasing how a Segway works and trying to showcase how great the brakes were on top of a cliff, in front of a cliff. And then the brakes didn't work and he just flew off of the cliff on the Segway.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's the end result most entrepreneurs would want to avoid, I'm afraid.
of course. Yeah, yeah. That's also something you definitely need to avoid. Riding off a cliff in your garden, also. Yeah, that is something we don't want in our pitch, obviously. Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. So then, how do you leverage that? You've mentioned in the beginning that you have very little time to make a first impression. After 30 minutes, the impression is basically already made. And you also mentioned that in the long form, you cannot fake authenticity. You will work with investors for a long time and they will understand who you are. You'll work with your bosses, with your employees, and so on and so forth. So, how do you build that kind of relationship from the ground up? Do you consider that when you're pitching? Do you approach every single potential investor as a long form relationship, or do you think about it a few steps down the road?
Yeah, I think it's important. It's an important question. So we sometimes think about pitches as, okay, we pitch 10 minutes and then we get the money in. It doesn't work like that. A pitch can open up a relationship with an investor, and hopefully you get a follow-up email and they want to chat a bit more about with you, and maybe you get into the phase where they do a due diligence with you. So indeed, it's an entire relationship. But what you want to achieve actually is that you don't have to go to the investor, but the investors come to you. So if you can have a great pitch somewhere at a conference where investors after a while, after your pitch, come to you, that is a great situation. Or maybe you can use a press also and make a bit of buzz around your concept so that investors come to you. So that is a better situation also to start from. Another thing I believe is that if you are at networking events, it might also be good to have like a 1 minute pitch or maybe a 2 sentence pitch of your concept. Because you know it, when you go to a network event, you start to talk with a potential investor, and the investor say, "Okay, you're a founder. What is your startup about?" Uh, if you can't say that in a few lines, then obviously maybe you're still too immature. Maybe you didn't thought it through yet. You didn't come to the core of your concept. So I believe that there's different formats. You need to have the 10-minute pitch, which can break open a relationship with an investor, but also the 1 minute pitch in a conversation at a network event, that also might make a big difference. So these are already elements that can help to develop the relationship also with the investors. Another, maybe a last thing is um, try to be honest from in the beginning. Try not to hide stuff, because after a while these investors are smart enough, they will figure it out. So of course, it's always like this to the outside world. Everything runs smooth, and in the back end, it's chaos. That's sometimes a startup life, but lying about some elements to convince people, and after a while it pops up, and then the atmosphere totally changes, of course. So that's also important in the relationship with investors, that you're being honest, that you're a reliable person also in a way.
Yeah, but it's also hard to do, like realistically, right? You have to consider so many things. Like you mentioned, the thing that we didn't really discuss is also the context for the pitch. So is it an elevator pitch? Is it a long form investor pitch? Is it like a longest form, like board meeting investor, whatever combination pitch where you have to talk about the details of your strategy? Or if you're, for example, preparing to go through a mergers and acquisition process, for example, being merged with another company, there is so much pitching that needs to be done along the way. And there's so much preparation that you need to do. Are there any particular strategies or frameworks or methodologies that one can utilize to kind of, be more reactive in the place where you have maybe a longer pitch and you can easily adapt it to a 1 minute pitch, or the other way around where you have like a 1 minute idea and then you can kind of stretch it out, or any other sort of approaches that you may recommend?
I would also say, if you want to create a match with the investor, is that you do your homework on the investor. Every investor has their own profile. They have a certain amount of money that they can invest between this and this range. They have a focus on a certain sector. They have some strategic guidelines. Of course, if you want to convince that investor and you think this is a match with my concept, you need to know them, the profile, and then you can make a pitch, go from a 1 minute pitch to a larger pitch where you add elements that can convince them, that are in line with their strategy also, and hopefully also in line with what you want to achieve with your startup. But then you're focusing a bit more on those elements. So that could be, I think, a very good strategy. Other strategies that I saw from one of the founders of a unicorn in Belgium was that he sent almost on a monthly basis updates on how it is going with his business in terms of customer traction, in terms of finance revenues. He sends all these metrics to different investors to show where you are. And at a certain point of time, one of these investors would say, "Okay, now you're in a stage where we want to engage a bit further, a bit more deeply with you." So that was also a very interesting approach that in the end, it's a unicorn now, that in the end worked pretty well, it seemed.
And there's a lot of survivorship bias in these kinds of examples, I feel, right? There's the ones that succeeded, and a lot of that mentality that we've discussed in the beginning of, those visionary founders that can do no wrong and their vision goes against the grain and so on and so forth. So everything that they have done must be replicated and must be done in the same way. But realistically, that's not the case. They good founders, good business people, successful business people, not good, but successful ones, they can do bad pitches, like in the Steve Ballmer example. That was an objectively a bad pitch by all things considered, but he is also an objectively very successful businessman that most business people would like to at least imitate in some way, form, or shape. So I'm guessing the answer here is, again, read your book, because it gives you a lot of kind of educational framework of how to approach pitching rather than just anecdotes.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. So there's, of course, you can give a bad pitch, and that's also some of the myths that I'm talking about in the beginning of the book, is that you always think you only have one shot, but actually, if you look into history, for instance, the Beatles, which are here on where are they are here at my home also. The Beatles, they played 1,200 shows before they signed their first contract deal. But you also have other examples. You have Jeff Bezos needed 60 meetings with investors before he raised the first million. So probably you have to practice, you have to use your pitch, and maybe the first time it was not a fantastic pitch, but your pitches also evolve once you try them out, once you get feedback and you try them out and you see that 5 or 6 investors all point to the same pain point. Then you might have to change your pitch, or you might be prepared for that type of question. So you get better also in it, and sometimes it takes some time before you can really um, reach the stage where you have a perfectly developed pitch. It's the same thing as me teaching at Antwerp Management School. The first times I teach something new, I get feedback from the audience, and then after a while, these things work, these things don't work, so you leave them out. So yeah, that's also how it goes with entrepreneurs pitching their ideas.
True, true. One thing that I've mentioned several times on the show and off the show, and it's generally a very well-known thing for entrepreneurs, is that failure is just a part of the process. You cannot succeed without failing along the way. That's how you learn, that's how you grow, that's how you expand what you have done before and make it better. Sometimes you have to kill your darlings and you have to stop doing something that you really like because it doesn't work or it no longer makes sense. Sometimes, or a lot of times, you have to go out of your comfort zone and be somewhere where you're not really comfortable or feel an expert in just because, well, you need to be there. And side note, I mentor startups in plug and play a little bit here in Vilnius. So what I've seen from startups in plug and play and outside of plug and play, generally speaking, in the local tech scene, is that a lot of those founders are technical founders. That just makes sense. You think of a technology first, you notice a niche in the business, and you try to apply the technology into the business. And then you're way out of your comfort zone as a technical founder trying to pitch to investors because you've basically never done that before. You don't really understand how that part of the world even works. You don't have the background necessary to just rely on that experience. And will you succeed the first time you pitch with that scenario? Probably not. Probably not. But the
Mhm.
same can be said for non-technical founders if they want to develop a technology. Will they develop anything successful? Probably not. Not until they learn. Not until they have the tools and the skill set to do it.
Yeah,
So
but
yeah.
indeed, your vision on failing is really important as an entrepreneur, because it's going to be like a roller coaster of ups and downs. So if you don't see the entrepreneurial process as a big learning experience that helps to develop yourself as a person, where you learn a lot of stuff, that's a totally different view as I need to make money as soon as possible. Then there's a totally different pressure you put on yourself also, and you will experience this entrepreneurial roller coaster much steeper and much more intense, which might make it difficult to sustain after a while. So if you see the entrepreneurial journey as a fun journey where you test out something, where you learn a lot from different people, that's a totally different way. And it's the same thing with pitching, because if you look at the pitch and you see it as a do or die um, pitch, then the pressure is so high on this. If you see it as a way to pitch in front of an investor and to learn from his or her feedback, that's a totally different way in managing your stress already before the pitch happens. So that's also something that I talk about, is how do you manage stress in pitches, because that could also make or break your pitch in the end.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it also depends on the personality, I feel. Again, anecdotally, I can feel stressed before a pitch, especially if it's a very important pitch. But at the same time, stress is a very nice source of energy where, okay, that I
Yeah,
can take that and I can channel that and funnel that
yeah,
into my pitch. On the other side of the spectrum, sometimes, when studying in the Antwerp Management School, I can see that, okay, well, I need to do a pitch, but, I have my my entrepreneurial journey, I have my day-to-day tasks, and they are all also very important. And the stakes in learning are not as high. I'm not going to lose a deal. I'm not going to fire anybody if I don't do this pitch very well. I may get a bad grade, or Robin will tell me I did a bad work. Not the best outcome, but it's also not very stressful if I fail. But then I lack that energy to put into the pitch, where I
Yeah,
might have performed much better
yeah.
if I felt that stress.
Yeah, that's also what science shows, is that your view on having stress is important. If you perceive it as something that is good, I need that to deliver, that's totally different than, oh no, I have stress and it will not work out. So the way you deal with stress also mentally is also an important element, just like you said. Yeah. And there are other ways to deal with stress. You have physical exercises that you can do. Everyone has their own methods to deal with stress. I remember as a student back in the days when I had to do an oral exam, most of the times I put a song on before I left. I put the kids, There Will Be No Next Time. So I hope that I didn't had any re-exams later on in the summer, and that's why I put that song on. And that was a great way for me to go to the exam with little stress also. So everyone has their own methods, and when getting older, you discover what works and what doesn't work. Another element, of course, is the basis is that you're well prepared. If you're well prepared, you're also building up confidence, and then the stress will be lower.
It's an exploratory journey, basically. You have to find new things about yourself. And
Yeah,
it connects very nicely, I feel, to what you've said about, knowing your investors, doing your homework in order to build a relationship with them. The same goes internally as well. You have to understand yourself, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, in order for those relationships to work. Because if you're just looking for any investor that will have you, and you completely ignore your own expectations, your own understanding of, what's moral or what's immoral, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, what's good, what's bad, then the relationship will fundamentally will not work for the same reasons that you've mentioned. It will come out. Your own internal understanding of the world will be in conflict of
mm,
what you're trying to push it into. That's at least what I feel. You have to find the balance between yourself and the world that you're living in, especially as an entrepreneur.
and of course, you need to put yourself into that situation so that you can learn. Some people run away from these stressful situations and never test themselves in those kind of situations. So if you want to become a good pitcher, you need to face those stress, those adrenaline that you have before you come on stage. So that's the only way to learn in the end.
Yeah, yeah, I agree completely. I agree completely. Going outside of your comfort zone and taking stress as you take it, and then reframing it in a positive manner is definitely something that I can get behind, anecdotally, not academically, unfortunately. But so far, we've talked a lot about the business side of things, the psychology, the relationships. But there's also the technology side of things. I'm sure that there are many people that are questioning right now, okay, what about AI? How does the mega hype of artificial intelligence play into the whole pitching process? Will AIs pitch to AIs nowadays? Because, a general investor hears hundreds of pitches and they're probably unable to decide what is the best one just holistically. They are limited in their approach. On the other side, people who are pitching to investors, they cannot make an ideal pitch to every single context for every single investor just by virtue of it them being limited. So maybe AI is this question or the solution to that question, where everything will be done through AI, or maybe no. What do you think? How does technology get
Well,
into this?
my view on it is that as long as human beings need to make the decisions, then having an AI up front on the screen, an avatar or whatever it is, doesn't really make the connection. That's my experience. I saw people presenting using simply a recorded video of an avatar making a fantastic story, but of course you don't create any connection if the other on the other side there's a human being. So I think as long as human beings are also taking the decisions on the other side, I think AI can be a big help, but more as an assistant for you to build great slides, to give you inspiration on the story. But always you are in charge. You can use AI to give you the inspiration, and you can put your own identity DNA in it. And it's always better if you are presenting yourself in front of that human being that needs to take the decision. So, in terms of creating connection, that's much better. Also, when you're pitching, people are screening you whether you will be the right person to work on the ID the coming months. If you are the one still working on the ID and it's not AI who's working on the ID the coming months, they want to screen you first, of course. And it's always better that you are presenting so that they can screen you. So my opinion is if on the other side there's still a human being taking these decisions, and if you are still the human being working out the project, then using AI as an assistant is at this point of time, as a co-pilot, is this at this point of time the way to go.
So, how would you then approach an AI assistant? What would you ask it to help you with during a pitch, and what would you do yourself?
Well, I'm not that good in making slides. Maybe one of my students can agree on that. I don't know. I try to do my best to make great slides, but if I see the AI tools nowadays that are building slides, it goes much faster. It's much better. So I think at least if you have to start from a blank sheet, I think using AI can really make sure that you're actually winning time. Another element is, of course, sometimes you need to look into a lot of information, and then AI can help you to create a shortcut, of course. Um, so that can help a lot. Uh, of course, if you're not an expert in the field and you're simply relying on AI, I think that could be still a bit dangerous to do. So if you're an expert in the field, then AI can help you a lot to win time to build the slides. But also maybe another point is to help you crafting out the right story. So I would add my story that I have in my head around the ID, and I would ask AI, could you make it more convincing, whatever you want to do? So that could be a way of using AI as an assistant, I think.
Yeah, that those are good examples. Those are good examples. I can say for myself that I definitely agree that the AI cannot do everything for your own. I still believe the human element in the pitching is the most important one because everything else just interchangeable. Figures are different, businesses are different, contexts are different, and there's always somebody who can come in and do more or less the same thing, unless it's very, very unique. But those are, far and small between in our commoditized market, generally speaking. So what I like doing with AI is to have AI criticize my pitch a lot of the time.
Mm,
Just
yeah.
outlining what I've written, and just asking them, okay, criticize it. Imagine you're an investor, and
Mhm,
I'm asking for this amount of money or whatever, and criticize my pitch. What don't you like? And then I just try and see whether or not that criticism makes sense in what I've written. Sometimes
mhm,
it does. Sometimes it shows me the obvious stuff that I've missed. Like, oh yeah, like, sure. How could I forget about adding a slide asking for the money when my pitch is about asking for the money, for
mhm.
example?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nonsensical. Where like, oh well, you could change your tone a little bit, and then you ask it again, and then oh, you can change your tone a little bit where it was before, and you kind of see where okay, this probably does not really apply to whatever I'm trying to do.
And I
But
also sometimes use it as I upload the pitch and then I ask, okay, what kind of questions would you ask when if you were an investor? So
Yeah, that's good.
that's another element. We always think about the Q&A as something that we can't prepare, but we actually can prepare it, not 100%, but you can do the exercise also with the founders, each trying to come up with 10 potential questions and then see which are the questions that are coming back. Probably we have a higher chance of getting those questions. So also in the Q&A, there's a lot of things that can go wrong and that you actually can prepare.
Yeah, yeah. And stepping a bit to the side of my own personal example, I work a lot with marketing and generally kind of company positioning, demand generation, stuff of that sort. That's basically where a lot of my skill set lies. And I'm a big fan of the omni-channel approach, where basically you have a consistency of your message throughout as many different channels as you can
Mhm.
logistically collect together. So for me, when I look at that process, I also think of it through an omni-channel approach where, okay, I've just did a pitch in a particular style with a particular story with a particular set of energy. I need to maintain that in my answers to the questions when I have those
Mhm.
questions. Because if my pitch is, about building a brighter future for a better tomorrow for humanity, and I'm altruistic and a visionary, and then they ask me questions and I'm like, well, yeah, I want to earn like 5,000 euros in the next month, and that's basically what I want to do as the next step. That disconnect can destroy the pitch retroactively.
Yeah,
That's how
yeah,
I
yeah,
see it. So
yeah, for sure.
connecting that is important.
Yeah, yeah, and another thing that I also saw in Q&As is that you get out of the pitch with a lot of adrenaline, with a lot of energy, and sometimes the mistake that you make then is that okay, you get the first question and then you hear something and you think, okay, I can answer this, and you already answered the question while you didn't listen to it, the entire question. That's also a very common thing that happens, and of course it's normal because you have a lot of energy coming out of the pitch and you know the answer to the question, but listen to the question, make sure you answer the question, don't attack the questionnaire, the one who's asking questions, don't be too defensive. But sometimes entrepreneurs, it's their baby, they worked on it day and night, and then there's someone who gives critics on it. Well, that's okay because you need the feedback. You need the feedback to develop it, and you need to be also showing to investors that you're not the arrogant, defensive person from the minute somebody raises a critic on your ID. So these are elements in the Q&A that you probably want to avoid. And other stuff is that you can make backup slides. You can even develop go-to messages. This means that you have a few messages in your mind that you want to repeat from your pitch. Like you said, build a consistent uh, story. And you might want to develop go-to messages, or we might have complementary go-to messages that you have prepared specifically for the Q&A. So there's always a question where you can answer the question and where you can also have an opportunity to go a bit further and push your go-to, as they call it, go-to messages.
Great advice. Great advice. What's then maybe some other practical advice that you can give to our listeners of how they can fairly easily make their pitches better? Because, that's the type of short form content that everybody likes.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, you need to realize that there is a beginning in a pitch. And most of the times, I think the beginning is a great opportunity to directly make a connection, have a cliffhanger, ask a question. Maybe starting, I would always advise people to start with the problem, not with the solution. As some people say, okay, my name is, and we developed this, but why on earth should it matter? Why did you develop this? So you can leave that out and directly start with a personal story, maybe with a use case, or maybe with a key number that is directly showing the problem. And then you show, okay, the it's not only me, it's not only the use case where the problem is, it's a bigger market out there, and we have a mission with our company to develop this solution and solve this problem. That is a great way of starting off a pitch. Another element is that the problem solution fit that you try to explain from in the beginning, that needs to be super clear and not too complex. Because if people are not with you after the problem and the solution slide, then all the other slides are useless. The go to market, the finance, if you don't understand the problem and the solution. So that is an important, that I would even say that's the backbone of your pitch. Um, and maybe another element is, okay, you have a beginning in the pitch, you also have a closing of your pitch. Most of the time, I see people closing off their pitch saying, this is the last slide. Are there any questions? But actually, you can use the closing of your pitch to give a great summary. Okay, this is our company. We are trying to solve this problem, and we have this kick-ass solution developed. That is a much greater way to end, or maybe end with your mission or something like that, something that sticks around. So you have a very powerful beginning, but also a very powerful closing of your pitch.
Thank you for your advice. On my front, the kind of advice that I gravitate towards was the mantra. Basically, have a
Hmm.
mantra for the pitch, and it's very much helps me connect the story from there on out.
Yeah.
The mantra is something that's fairly simple, uh,
Yeah.
theoretically at least, and that's kind of is the glue that helps everybody together. Like, okay, how do I build a story? The mantra basically helps me do that, because okay, everything comes down to one simple message, and then when you have
Yeah.
your strong beginning and strong end and then connect everything together, the whole pitch becomes much more
Yeah.
robust. But can you tell us what a mantra is? Because I remember you telling me and I liked it, but I'm sure that many people do not know what that is when it relates to pitching.
Well, actually, I think I picked it up from Guy Kawasaki. Guy Kawasaki is the marketing, or was the marketing officer, head of marketing of Apple. So Apple does a very good job on, if you think about the marketing, of course. And he said, okay, every startup needs a mantra, not a mission statement of 300 words, making it very complex to follow, but actually one sentence, maybe even 3 words, summarizing what is your business about. If you do that exercise, it really helps you to go to the core of your idea, what you actually try to achieve. And that's a great exercise, but that's also a great way to explain it to other people. If you can start from that mantra and then give a bit more information, or if you can end the pitch with that mantra, people are with you also, and you give a very powerful signal to the investors or the management committee in front of you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So now let's talk a little bit about simple things. What do you feel? Is talking too much or too little a problem in a pitch? So, for example, I tend to talk too much. As you can see from my question, I could have asked you it in the beginning. It could have been over 3 times by now, but I am still talking, and that's just my cross to bear. What do you think? Is there like a particular balance that you need to follow?
Well, well, if you say too little and too much, probably both are not good, of course. But I have more cases where people talk too much than cases where people talk too little. I didn't had it a lot when I had to say to people, "Oh, you talk too little in your pitch." Most of the time, they have information overload, and we need to realize that we are human beings. We have a limited information processing capability. We can't process all the information. Yesterday, I saw a pitch of 3 minutes. And in that pitch, the entrepreneur tried to push all the information that he would probably put into a 10-minute pitch. But that is killing the audience. You can't process all the information in such a short span of time. So maybe talking too much then, if I have to pick one.
Okay, I think that's sound advice. From my own anecdotal observations, I feel the same way. Like most of the pitches that I've heard, they definitely do not have the problem of talking too much. I think that's
Yeah.
one of those kind of basic things that everybody is being taught when you're pitching. Okay, you have a limited amount of time, you need to say specific things in that time, so try and limit it. How would you describe a perfect pitch in one word or maybe a couple of words?
In one word. Okay. Okay, that's not easy in one word. Maybe passion. I think maybe in the end, for me, that's the most important thing, showing the drive to make it work. Um, yeah, because like I said before, the entrepreneurial journey is going to be so tough if you're not passionate about the thing that you're presenting. Yeah, then you probably will not survive the emotional and entrepreneurial journey that you will be going through. So passion is important. Then again, I was also hesitating. Maybe evidence and proof might also be very important. If you only have passion and it's only drive, that's okay. But if you do not have any substance, do not have any evidence or any strong signals from the business case, so probably those two elements, bringing those two elements together, for me, make a great pitch.
Does any pitch from your experience stand out? The one that's, that is passionate, that is very data based, that you remember, that you would consider a great pitch?
Well, I had a lot of female entrepreneurs in my class presenting in a very great way. I also remember one of the pitches at Slush in 2021 of, I think her name was Jasmine Tagisson from Hormona. That was a great pitch, in my opinion, because she directly went into the problem and explaining the problem in only 10 seconds, 20 seconds already. And it became very clear what the problem was. And there was a great connection with the audience. So that was a great pitch. Maybe a more well known one is, of course, the Steve Jobs kind of pitches. I think I remember the Steve Jobs pitch on the iPod, which had a great tempo. He could speed up and then slow down when he had to take the key, make a key point. And I also remember from that pitch that he did a great competitive analysis where it directly came clear that the existing solutions on the market fall short, and that the iPod could really make the difference here in that market. So I think that was also a very nice pitch.
Those are some nice examples. Nice examples. Then let's close off with another simple, bite sized advice, or maybe not so simple. What is one piece of advice that you would give entrepreneurs before a pitch? One thing that you wish everybody knew?
Um, we already give a lot of advice, of course, but I would definitely focus on well, there is research bundling all the insights of previous researches of the last 10 years, and they actually say that the most powerful stuff that comes out of research are three type of signals. The first is showing signals of passion, of energy, of drive. That's important. The second one is showing signals of being professional, meaning you are well prepared, you know your numbers, you are taking this very serious, you're working hard. That's the second signal that you want to send. And the third signal was interpersonal signal. You had a match with that investor, with the other person on a personal level, which also means that they perceived you as a coachable person, a nice person to work with, who listens to feedback, who is very collaborative, who is those kind of who is nice to work with in the end. So these were the most powerful signals according to scientific research, and maybe that is a great summary also. In my book, I talk about the 4 P's of pitching, where you have to think about your pitching profile. Who are you and why are you pitching? The pitching plan, the structure and the flow of your pitch. Um, we also talk about the proof, the evidence that you can already show, customer traction, and so on. And the last one is your pitching performance, the last P, where we already talked today a lot about body language, tone of voice, passion, and those kind of things. Performing your pitch is also the last P. That's maybe a summary of my biggest advice that I can give to the ones pitching ideas.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Where do people find you? I know that you are going to go to conferences, and of course, the book is already coming out. Has it already come out? So people are probably already able to buy it and read about the 4 Ps. But where do people find you and read more?
So since today the book is out, so it's very fresh, actually. I'm giving a sneak preview at the Supernova conference in Antwerp, which is the biggest innovation, technology, and entrepreneurship conference in Belgium. So that's where I give a sneak preview. And then on the 24th of April in the evening at Antwerp Management School, my home institution, of course, I will do the more official book launch. And then also the coming months, I will try to travel around to see people, and most of the times also take the opportunity to promote the book, and to also, that's my um, biggest concern or biggest goal, is to give the insights to a broader audience, because from writing a book you will not get rich, so that's definitely not my goal. My goal is to make sure that all these more scientific work are translated to a broader audience out there, so that people can make impact with strong ideas and change the world for the better. That's the bigger aim that I have with the book.
Okay, you heard it here, folks. Find Robin if you're ever in Antwerp, if you're in AMS, or if you're in one of the places that Robin is going to be traveling around. If you're pitching, if you're looking to learn how to pitch more effectively, I can definitely guarantee that you will find nice insights in the book itself. So, yeah, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen to about us talk about pitching. If you liked what you've heard here today, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the bell and train your pitch. If you didn't like, tell us why in the comments. We'll try to make it better more in the future. And have a nice week. Have a nice day. See you later. Bye bye.